Hi everyone. So in this video, what we are going to do is to follow up on the feature that we did in the last video, which is to create the customer search for or during the order creation. And this time it's about writing the test case for that. So first of all, let's look into the running application once again to see on how this functionality now looks. So if I type a particular string, then it will actually go ahead and search in the customer's database table for first name and last name, and then display the corresponding results. So in order to write a test for this particular component, it turned out actually to be a little bit tricky in the web integration test space compared to tests that we have done previously. And the reason for that, I will just show you in a second, is mainly that the suggestion field which we are currently using, if we go back here, then we can actually take a look. So this is the entity suggestion field that we have introduced, and this component does not really have an API that we could leverage for actually like performing what we have seen in the UI to actually trigger like search for something and then see the results and so on and so forth. So at least not directly. Okay, but I think we can take a look at this when we create our test. So let me just for now copy this customer edit test and call it order edit test. And here, I think so. First of all, we can get rid of the majority of the stuff here. I think when we have a particular test case that we would like to express, then we could go with like expressing our intent. So for example, given two customers with letter L are present when searching for letter L, then two customers are found. So in this case, we will only concentrate on just the testing of the filtering functionality, of the search functionality that we have basically outlined here by this query definition. And so let's take a look. So first of all, what we need is the order edit and not the customer edit anymore. So this will go ahead and be like this. It should also be an order type. And I think with that, we already have our editor in place. And what we then additionally do or need to do is to, before we open the screen, we actually spin up some test data. And for that, we can actually leverage the newly created API for the customers test data. So what we can say is customer save, and then we can go with some first name, last name. So we go with that, and then we also just store this reference. Just create 3 of those. So the next would be one customer with the letter L. And the third one should also be something with an L. All right, so now we have 3 customers in the database. And when we now open our particular order editor, then we can probably take a look. And I think first of all, we can get rid of the majority of those things here and just think about on how to achieve that. So as I said already, it is not really possible to through the UI component, like the entity suggestion field, to directly trigger a search. But yeah, and this is also because of a little bit of the implementation. So if you go and look into the details of this entity suggestion field, then it will actually see that the search actually happens in a background thread, and this is all a little bit too problematic for our test case. But what I found is, and for that we can first of all actually get a reference. So if we go here and say order edit, and then go ahead with get window get component, then we can go for our customer field, and this would not be a component but actually an entity suggestion field of type customer. Yeah, and then we have to cast this one. But what we see here is that we have something which is called get search executor, and it's already displayed here. So this returns us a component like an interface called SearchExecutor, and in fact it turns out like if we go here and see for our query, then it's actually just an implementation of such a search executor under the hood. It would also be possible to programmatically assign a particular search executor to this suggestion field, but what it boils down to, if we look at the implementation of that interface, it's just a method that has, it's just a function interface that is basically saying, okay, so search, and then you give it a search string, and then it will return you the list of the bound entities. So since we have configured our order editor here, our entity suggestion field here, to use this particular query, when we get this search executor, we can actually perform the search method on it and then return just the, or like search for a particular string. So for example, here we could go with an L, and here I would go with map off, and then nothing else. And afterwards what we get back is so we should have a list of search results. Now, with that in place, what we can go ahead here and say is we can just do some kind of assertions on this list. So, and since we know what we expect to come back is mainly that we want to have Luke and Lord Voldemort in the list, but Mr. Miyagi should not be in the list. So this means we could use this method contains exactly in any order, and then we go with those two instances here, and here this already should be enough in order to basically simulate the search functionality. Okay, so this is already working. That's great. So then the next thing what we can probably do is that since we have this form interactions API, it would be probably good to just put those parameters or this information here in this bean. So I think first of all we can make it a method called let's say get suggestions, and what we now can do is to say we would like to move this particular method into this form interactions API, and if we then take a look back at our test, then we say form interactions get suggestions, and then it's actually not really what we expect, because we didn't want to pass in the order editor, because this is already present for as part of the constructor here, or the factory method. So let me just change that here a little bit. So first of all, what we need is to have this here as a parameter. So I will just go ahead and do the command Alt P, which will then create me a parameter, and I will go with the search string name. And the second thing is that we also need the component ID. And then additionally, what we also need is the type in order to get the proper type back. So this means we have to have something like this here in place, where we say this is going to return a list of T, And then we also have to change that to T, and I think this one we can now directly return. So this should already be enough, and I think we now don't actually need that anymore. So let's get rid of this one. Yes, it actually still works because we have the editor here in place, so we can use this one. And since before we always had this, you know, like these higher level methods, and then also the methods that just give or just return us a particular component, I think here we can basically do the same. So if we go for this one and create a method, and then we call it entity suggestion field, and this is then a little bit more aligned in how we have done it here at the top. Okay, and then it would be the entity suggestion field actually. So with that in place, we should actually be fine. You know, I just need to change the parameters here now. So it would be search string L component ID, and then afterwards I would have to say customer class in order to get back a customer list. Okay, so let's run that once again. Okay, so this still works. So this means now we can go ahead and create our second test case. And in this time, I was thinking, let's actually, you know, check not so much on the searching, but once we have searched and then, you know, set a particular value or selected a particular value, then it should be bound to the entity. So this means, yeah, our test case would be something like matching customer when selecting customer, then the customer is let's go like this. Is assigned to the order. Here we still, you know, keep all the objects in place, and we do also the same thing up until here. And here now comes the question if we actually would want to search once again. I mean, we can still do it, and then perhaps let's go with now the other way around, and then we go for Mr. Miyagi. And then the next thing is that what we can additionally do is we can say form interactions set. And here we already have a similar method, which is called set entity combo box field value. In this case, we would actually like to have the same, but for our particular suggestion field. And here what we additionally need is the object. So we would go then and say Mr. Miyagi, and then it would be the customer class. So right now it wouldn't work because we would get a typing exception. But so since we don't have a combo box at hand, but what we can do is say set entity suggestion field value, and then we just use our new method entity suggestion field, and then we can change this variable. And yeah, here we would probably then not use this mechanism to load from the options once again, but instead what we could do is to say entity, and there's actually a method called set value from user, which is actually a little bit more aligned to what to what the user would actually do. So there are some internal changes then under the hood, what it means, you know, when the event is fired and so on. So here we still have a problem. Entity suggestion field right now requires just a component ID. Okay, this should actually be probably also that we here need the entity class, just so that we can actually define what T should come back as. And I think this way it should actually work. And now we also want to have the entity suggestion field of type T back. And now we set this value. So if we now go back to our test case, then we can say set entity suggestion field value and then search for Mr. Miyagi. And I think the assertion, what we could do is, since we have the order edit instance in place, we could say get edit entity, and then so let me just fix the import statement here, because we actually want to import our newly, or like the one of the generated Java here, where we actually have some custom assertions in place, and then we can say has customer, and here we would then also search for Mr. Miyagi. So let's run that and see if this already fulfills our needs, and in case yes, we can refactor the test case a little bit so that the test data, for example, is then created upfront, and we also could just open the editor in perhaps like a helper method or something. So since this one is exactly the same, I think we can actually put that into a setup method and make those some fields that we are automatically creating at every test, at the beginning of every test. So, and then I think this one already we can get rid of. Like this. So let's run that and see if it still continues to function. Okay, so this seems to be fine. I think then for now, since these three lines are the same as well, so what we can probably say is to have a method which we call what we need is both of those. We need the form interactions and we need the order editor. So probably it would only be sufficient to open order editor. I think this would then do the corresponding heavy lifting here for us. I think we don't need that any further. Okay, so there was just a problem in this refactoring, so but this should be fine. Let's run it once again, and then I think we are done with this test. Perhaps now, since this is only about the search functionality of the order, we can actually make it a dedicated suffix that's called customer search. And I think with that we are done with this video. So thank you very much for watching, and then see you next time.